The wind moved slow across the plains that evening, carrying with it the faint scent of pine from distant hills and the whispering hush of tall dry grass. Elias Turner stood near the gate of his ranch, one hand resting on the top rail, the other hanging lazily by his side. The sky was a washed-out gold fading into rose, a quiet beauty that usually gave him a moment of peace. Yet today, the old loneliness had settled on him particularly heavy, pressing on his ribs like a weight he could not remove. He had lived alone since he'd been 19, ever since his parents passed after a fever swept through the valley. Folks offered help then, for a few weeks, bringing bread, salted meats, and awkward condolences. But when grief didn't break him into someone loud and emotional, they slowly faded away. They thought his silence meant he didn't need anyone. They couldn't have been more wrong. He became known as the quiet rancher, the ghost who worked the land and kept to himself. Women in town never looked his way for long. Not because he was unkind or unpleasant, but because he simply didn't know how to speak his heart. He feared saying the wrong thing more than saying nothing at all. So, he watched the world from a distance. He watched young couples stroll through town laughing. He watched children run by with mud on their hands. He watched people live, and he lived beside them, not with them. The loneliness was familiar enough that he no longer tried to shake it. It was simply part of him, until the night everything changed. It began as a sound. Heavy, slow, unmistakably human. Elias paused mid-step, lantern in hand, scanning the dimming twilight. His horses were restless in their stalls, shifting and snorting. Coyotes would not make them uneasy like this. Nor deer. No, this was something else. He walked toward the barn, the soft crunch of his boots swallowed by the quiet. His breath came slow, steady. Fear was not something he entertained often. Hardship had a way of numbing that. But curiosity, real human curiosity, stirred something long dormant inside him. He turned the corner, and there she was, a woman, slumped against the wooden plank wall, her knees bent, her chest rising and falling with the deep, weary breaths of someone who had walked far beyond her strength. The lantern light struck her face first, cheeks streaked with dried tears, lips cracked from wind, but eyes still alert, still burning with the will to survive. Her hair fell in a long dark curtain that framed her broad shoulders. She was tall, much taller than him, and strong-featured, every line of her body shaped by life outdoors and under the open sky. Her clothing was Apache, carefully leather-stitched, though frayed in places. A hunting knife hung loosely by her belt, not drawn, not threatening, merely present. When she realized he was standing there, she straightened, though the exhaustion shook her limbs. "You can tell me to leave," she said before he could utter a word. Her voice was low but steady, like water running deep underground. "Most do. They see me and grow afraid." Her words floated between them, heavy with something deeper than the night. Elias stared at her, not out of fear, but because he had never seen someone so full of both strength and sorrow at the same time. He didn't speak at first. He hadn't used his voice much that day, and the words tangled inside him like fence wire. But something in her tone, something tired and raw, made him try. "I wouldn't," he said quietly. Her gaze flickered, surprised, and maybe hopeful. She inhaled as though gathering the courage to reveal a wound. "I am starving," she whispered. Her hand pressed to her chest, not her stomach. "Not for food. I can hunt. I can live off the land. That is not the hunger I speak of." Her eyes lifted to his. "I am starving for a man, not for his body, but for his presence. For his company, for his heart, to be seen, to not walk through this world like a shadow no one wants." Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from the pain of truth spoken aloud after being silent too long. "My name is Sarah," she continued. "In my tribe, I was always too tall, too strong. The women feared I would overshadow them. The men said I was made wrong, too big to be desirable, too fierce to be cherished. I tried to make myself smaller, quieter, less. But I was born as I am, and the world around me decided that who I am is too much." Elias felt his heartbeat change rhythm, like it recognized something. The words she spoke were not foreign. They echoed something deep in him, something he had never said aloud. He knew what it was to live unseen. To be considered strange not for what he said, but for what he didn't. To feel like a ghost in his own life. He took a slow breath, let the silence settle warm and gentle instead of cold. "I'm Elias," he finally said. "You can rest here." The words came quiet but firm, like a promise. She blinked, as if she needed a moment to believe he meant it. He held out his hand, not boldly, not timidly, simply offered it. Sarah stared at it, then placed her own large, calloused hand in his. Her touch was strong, but she held him with surprising care, as though afraid she might break something precious. And maybe she was. He guided her inside the barn first, where there was warmth from the animals' bodies and the faint sweet smell of hay. He fetched water in a tin cup, watching as she drank slowly, gratefully. He warmed cornbread in a small skillet and gave her beans from the pot he had cooked earlier. She ate quietly, with dignity, never rushing or devouring, only accepting what was offered like it held meaning. When she finished, she exhaled, a sound that seemed to release something buried inside her, something that had been clenched and aching for years. Elias sat across from her, lantern set between them, casting soft golden light across their faces. They did not speak for a long time. They didn't need to. Finally, Sarah said softly, "When I said I am starving for a man, what I meant was I am starving for someone who does not look away." Elias lifted his gaze, eyes steady, warm. "I won't look away," he said. The lantern flickered, and for the first time in a long while, two lonely lives stopped being lonely. Days passed gently, threaded with small routines that slowly became something like shared life. Dawn came soft and golden, pulling mist across the lower pastures. Elias woke early out of habit, the same way he always had, yet now there was a different quiet waiting for him, one not sharp with emptiness, but warm with presence. Sarah rose with him, her movements steady and sure, though she still carried the wary hesitance of someone who had spent too long expecting to be pushed away. They moved around each other easily, without speaking much, but their silence was different now. It was not a wall. It was a shared language. Sarah helped with the ranch work. The first morning, when Elias went to lift a heavy sack of feed, she stepped beside him and took the weight with one arm, carrying it as though it was nothing more than a basket of grain. Elias blinked, startled, then laughed softly, an awkward, unsure laugh that surprised even him. Sarah looked at him with a small warmth in her eyes, not proud of her strength, not boasting, simply unafraid to be seen as she was. That alone was something new for both of them. They repaired fences together. Elias hammered the posts while Sarah held the rails with a steady grip that did not falter. They tended the cattle. She moved with an ease that reminded him she had grown up with mountains, rivers, and plains as her teachers. She could read wind changes by how the grass leaned, track an animal by faint prints Elias never would have noticed, and move through the open world with a quiet grace that almost seemed like belonging. And Elias, he found himself wanting to speak more, not to fill silence, but to share it. Words came slowly at first, uncertain and shy, like foals learning how to run. He told her about his parents, about the fever, about the years spent believing solitude was safer than being misunderstood. Sarah listened the way the earth listens to rain, absorbing, accepting, never interrupting. She told him more of her own life. How her tribe valued strength but feared it when it existed in a woman. How she could hunt better than most men, lift logs they needed two men to move, and how that made her both admired and avoided. She had once hoped someone would see her heart instead of her size. Instead, they treated her as a symbol, not a person. A reminder of what did not fit into their expectations. When she left, she expected grief. Instead, she felt only silence. She had wandered weeks across desert and woodland, sleeping beneath branches and cliff shadows. The loneliness gnawed at her deeper than hunger ever had. Elias listened to every word as though each one mattered, because it did. But the world beyond the ranch did not stay quiet. The first time they went into town together, the air shifted. Elias didn't think much of it. He needed flour, nails, and a few new horse bridle straps. Sarah walked beside him, her steps slow and careful, as though trying not to take up more space than she did. But she couldn't hide who she was. Her height, her presence, her strength, they announced themselves. Conversations hushed, heads turned, whispers fluttered like startled birds. "That's her. Look at the size of her. Apache. Wild folk. He brought her to live with him. Did he choose her or did she choose him?" Sarah heard every word. She didn't flinch, not outwardly, but Elias saw the way her fingers curled slightly at her sides, as if bracing against a storm she had known too many times before. Clayton Briggs, who always carried the swagger of a man who believed the world should bend around him, stepped out of the saloon doorway with a grin that wasn't friendly. "Well now," he drawled, arms crossing. "The ranch ghost has company. Didn't think you had it in you, Elias." He shook his head in a mocking pity. Couldn't find a normal woman, so you hauled in a giant from the hills. Sarah stood still, steady, like a mountain. But her jaw tightened. Elias's chest burned, not with fear, but with something protective and fierce he hadn't known he was capable of. His voice came quiet, steady. She's with me. Clayton raised an eyebrow, laughing. With you, or just staying until she finds something better. Men don't keep women like that. They're too strong. They don't know how to be tamed. Sarah finally spoke. I do not belong to him, she said, her voice even and calm. Nor to you, nor to any man. She looked at Elias then, and her expression softened. But I choose to stay with him. That is different. Clayton's smirk twisted. You think choosing matters here? This is settlement land. Folks don't take kindly to your kind. Elias stepped forward, closer than he had ever dared to stand to another man in a challenge. Leave, he said, not loudly, not angrily, just firmly, with something unshakable behind it. Clayton hesitated, not because he respected Elias, but because the quiet certainty in his voice felt unfamiliar and unsettling. Men like Clayton were used to resistance they could crush, not stillness they couldn't move. He snorted, spat into the dust, and walked away, though not without a last glare. The whispers did not stop as Elias and Sarah finished their errands. But they walked home side by side, the silence between them now full of everything they could not yet say. Back at the ranch, Sarah sat beside the corral fence, watching the amber evening settle low over the land. Elias sat next to her, their shoulders nearly touching. After a long while, she spoke, her voice low. I did not want to cause you trouble. Elias shook his head. You didn't. They were trouble long before you came. She turned to look at him. The setting sun caught her face, softening her strong features, lighting her eyes like embers. You are not afraid of them. I have lived with fear of being seen for most of my life, he said. I am tired of it. Sarah's breath trembled, not from weakness, but from something deeply felt. The sky deepened to violet. A single star appeared. The ranch lay quiet around them, peaceful and alive. Sarah's hand found Elias's, slowly, like asking a question. He didn't pull away. He intertwined his fingers with hers, letting their palms rest together, warm and sure. They sat like that as night grew around them, two souls who had once been unbearably alone, now finding that loneliness didn't stand a chance when met with understanding. Their story was not loud, not dramatic, but it was real, and it was theirs.